After the accidents at Southall, Ladbroke Grove and Hatfield, many British rail passengers thought they'd seen the last rail disaster. However, in 2001, the fears came flooding back. On the 28th of February 2001, just before 5 AM, train 1 Foxtrot 23, operated by Great North Eastern Railway or GNER, left Newcastle Central Station in Newcastle upon Tyne, bound for King's Cross Station in London. The train was comprised of an Intercity 225 set, with Class 91 locomotive 91023 as power, pushing 9 Mark IV coaches and Class 82 driving van trailer 82221 at the front. The train was operating in a push-pull configuration, which basically means there's a locomotive at one end and a DVT or driving van trailer at the other end to control the locomotive when the DVT is leading. GNER usually had the Class 91 facing north towards Scotland and the DVT facing south towards London. On this day, 82221 was leading the train while the Class 91 pushed from the rear. 73 miles outside Newcastle, 1 Foxtrot 23 pulls into York Station to make a station stop and departs just before 6 AM to continue its journey south. A few minutes after leaving York, 91023 got the train set up to about line speed for this section of 125 miles an hour. The passengers and crew settled into the journey, having no reason to be alarmed. Little did they know that trouble was already brewing. Further up the line, a freight train was lumbering northbound, operated by Freightliner under their heavy haul sector. It was running under head code 6 Golf 34. It consisted of 16 HHA hopper wagons being pulled by Class 66 loco 66521. 6 Golf 34 was hauling around 1,600 tons of coal from the port of Immingham to the power station at Ferrybridge. The freight train was approaching the small village of Great Heck, a few miles from Selby, at about 54 miles an hour. At about the same time, the Intercity 225 was approaching the same area, at about 125 miles an hour. What the drivers of both trains didn't know was that disaster was just seconds away. Also approaching Great Heck, heading westbound along the M62 motorway, was a Land Rover Defender. Towing a Renault Savannah estate on a trailer, it was being driven by Gary Hart. The 37-year-old builder, father of 4, and who had recently divorced from his wife, was driving his vehicle from his home to the other side of the Pennines for work. As he approaches the bridge that takes the motorway over the East Coast Main Line, something odd happens. The vehicle suddenly starts to drift to the left towards the grass. Then it leaves the road altogether and starts speeding down an embankment. With no brakes being applied, it smashes through 2 fences before coming to rest. Hart, dazed and confused, looks around to see his vehicle has come to rest on a railway line. He gets out of his vehicle and calls 999 to get help. As he's on the phone, the operator tries to pin down Hart's location, but then Hart looks up the track and to his horror sees the Intercity 225 heading straight towards his Land Rover. At the same time, the driver of the Intercity 225, John Weddell, sees the Land Rover in his path and throws his train into emergency braking. Hart yells into the phone, "There's a train coming!" And seconds later, all hell breaks loose. One Foxtrot 23 ploughs into the Land Rover just after 6:13 AM. On impact, the front half of the car is sheared off, while the other half and the trailer with the other car on it are thrown to the side of the tracks. Large pieces of debris passing underneath the DVT's wheels caused its front bogie to derail. The Intercity 225 continued on down the track for a further 500 metres until the derailed left wheels on the front bogie of the DVT, which were now running between the rails in the ballast, struck the closure rail to a set of points to a yard called Plasmore. This sent it straight into the path of the Freightliner heavy-haul coal train coming in the opposite direction. The collision between the freight train and the Intercity 225 occurred at a combined speed of 142 miles an hour, which is to date the highest speed collision since the Ladbroke Grove accident of 1999. The damage caused was horrific. DVT 82221 was completely crushed down to its frame, killing the driver, John Weddell, instantly. 66521 overrode the DVT on impact and was ripped clean from its bogies. Its fuel tank ruptured, spraying fuel all over the derailing wagons and coaches. The locomotive then tipped onto its left side and came to rest in the back garden of a resident with severe cab and frame damage. There were two drivers in the cab of the freight train at the time, Stephen Dunn, who was driving, and Andrew Hill, who was teaching Dunn the new route. Sadly, Dunn lost his life, but Hill managed to crawl out the wreckage, but with severe injuries. As for the passengers in the GNER 225, they weren't as lucky. Several passenger coaches had fallen down the embankment and suffered varying degrees of damage. One even ended up upside down. Some had their parts of their roofs missing, and some were crushed. Some of the first people to help the injured were the residents of Great Heck, who heard the crash and ran to the site, and they helped the injured until rescuers arrived. In total, 10 people died. 82 were taken to hospital, with 52 sustaining serious injuries. But people began to ask, how could this happen? And why? An investigation by the Health and Safety Executive, North Yorkshire Police and British Transport Police found no mechanical issues with either the bridge that takes the motorway over the line, the car, the trailer, or the railway itself. So the investigation shifted to the man at the wheel of the Land Rover, Gary Hart. What emerged about Hart painted the picture of an unusual man. In his police interviews, he described his life as being 1,000 miles an hour, and he reckoned he could go for 36 hours without needing a break. He also skipped meals and stayed up all night playing computer games. And 8 days before the accident, he met a woman online. The two exchanged messages and phone calls through the course of every day. On the night before the accident, the two had spent quality time speaking over the course of the night. Between speaking to his love interest, seeing his family, and working, Hart didn't really have much time to sleep. During his police interviews, Hart claimed he had had a 3-hour sleep prior to setting off on the morning of the crash, but when he found out that the police had spoken to his sweetheart, he amended the time down to 45 minutes. In the end, the investigation concluded that Gary Hart had fallen asleep at the wheel of his car. This was most likely caused by him staying up all night talking to his sweetheart. This was more than enough for the police to charge Gary Hart with 10 counts of causing death by dangerous driving. During his trial through November and December of 2001, Hart protested against the charges, saying he didn't fall asleep, and he claimed that he heard a bang shortly before the car left the motorway. The jury weren't convinced, and on the 13th of December 2001, Gary Hart was sentenced to 5 years in prison on all 10 counts of causing death by dangerous driving. DVT 82221 was completely destroyed and scrapped. 66521 was taken to Freightliner's Midland Road maintenance facility in Leeds, where it stayed for a while until in 2006 it was taken to Booth's Rotherham in South Yorkshire, where it was also scrapped. 91023, although it did derail, only suffered minor damage and was quickly repaired and put back into service. Interestingly enough, this was the same loco that was involved in the Hatfield accident a few months earlier, where it was also only minorly damaged. In the later part of 2001, it was renumbered to 91132 after a refurbishment of the Class 91 fleet, After this refurbishment, the locomotive continued service for another 19 years, until the 24th of January 2020, when it was retired and taken out of service. It is currently in storage at Belmont Depot in Doncaster. The Mark IV coaches were also praised for their crashworthiness in the HSE report, since their tough body structure is likely what saved most of the passengers' lives. 20 years have passed since this incident, and it's likely that an incident like this will never happen again. However, this wasn't the last crash on the East Coast Main Line, but that's another story.